Hey, friends. Up next, I had the opportunity to speak with Rebecca Llewellyn. Rebecca is a friend of mine and also a breathwork practitioner and shamanic practitioner. We dive deep into ancient practices. We also dive deep into what it feels like to be doing the spiritual work. But most importantly, one of the biggest key takeaways for me was doing the earthly work and being our own body here while we are doing these amazing spiritual practices. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope that you also take away some beautiful nuggets along the way as well. Enjoy our chat. So, welcome to the Lucy Smiles living room today. I am so honored, so blessed, so grateful for this beautiful spirit, this beautiful soul to be with me today as we are going to share a heart to heart. And before we get started, Rebecca, I would like to just share a little glimpse of who you are, but you will learn more about Rebecca through this beautiful conversation. So, Rebecca Llewellyn is a multidimensional medicine woman, a shaman, a light, and a way shower. She is a shamanic practitioner, a triple certified breathwork practitioner, a mentor, a channel, a guide for those who are on the path of spiritual and personal transformation, and has been actually walking the path of spirit in service for over 15 years. It's amazing. So, welcome, Rebecca Llewellyn, to the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. I'm so honored.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me into the
Oh,
living room.
oh my gosh. I'm looking at your beautiful backdrop, and I think, I would love to start with so many things, but what I would love to start with is, can you give us a window of your journey? And one of the gifts for me on my journey was that you shared your journey privately. I think it was just, under a year ago.
Mhm.
I'll share as we begin this and as you get to give us the glimpse of the journey in the window through your life, is I met you, I think 3.5 years ago. And I was able
How
to walk
long?
into this. Yeah. I'm trying to put the numbers together because I've been in Mexico for 2 years. And so I met you, we'll call it 3 years ago, and I got to see the Rebecca, the shaman, the breathwork practitioner in her glory, in her space, in her beautiful essence. And then I was able to, a couple of years later, when you offered your community an opportunity to see into the life of Rebecca Llewellyn, the woman, the corporate success, the all of those other things, it was such a gift. And so my desire and my gift with my Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast is to allow people to see that where they are is where they're meant to be to get to where they're going. So, in that light, I would love for you to take us back and share the journey in any way that you can. And just, I leave it to you, my beautiful soul sister.
Oh, thank you. Um, it's something I always say to my clients, my community is like every moment brings you into this now moment.
Mhm.
Nothing could have happened. Nothing else prepares you except for the moment that leads you to right now. And that includes your moments and my moments for this presencing, right?
Mhm.
So everything is with divine timing and purpose, even though we may not feel that way when we're on our knees. The journey has been real and it continues, like the journey's not done, right? And I think that's kind of the false assumption, is that we achieve a certain space or status or placement or certification, but truly the
Mhm.
journey is, as long as you're breathing, the journey is taking place. And the more open and curious we are, I think the richer it is, because you're there for the experience. But you touched on it. Like most humans on the path, I had a job, um, and and yet I was a sensitive. I was an empath, even as a little girl. And I remember being a little girl. I grew up on a farm, and I remember winter times. We lived on top of a hill, and we would wait to a certain moment in the snowsuits, in the kitchen, before we have to make our way down the hill to get the bus. And I remember listening to the radio, and I couldn't understand why I knew the lyrics to songs that I never really heard before. But I would play this game in my head to try and see if I knew the next word, the next word, the next word. And again, I didn't live in a household that was very much into pop culture. Like, my mom was very much into classical music. My dad was really into like old rock and roll. So
Mhm.
I think I had an understanding when I was younger about that kind of connection to other realms and planes.
Mhm.
And growing up, they, they kind of shut down for a good while, especially in the
Mhm.
middle teen years. And then they started to open and expand for me at around 19, 20, 21.
Mm.
I'm really lucky because in my teen years, although I was going through a lot of hard stuff as a young girl, my earthly story, my parents divorced, and I was angry, and fill in the blank. I really started to explore religion and spirituality, and my dad would buy me different books, even though he was going to church every, every Sunday. Um,
Wow.
he was buying me books on different things like mediums and channels, and so I couldn't get enough of that. I was definitely, absorbed. I would absorb that kind of information and those stories very, very
Mhm.
quick. I was very hungry for it.
Mm.
So in my 20s, and I was following the path of art, of theater, of performance, of musical theater, to be specific. Um, and in my 20s, I'd get to a point where my channels would really open, and then they would shut down again because I'd get afraid, and I didn't have the tools or the
Mhm.
resources to understand anything. So I would be really exhausted after like a tech run or a rehearsals. You've been in rehearsal hall for, 10 hours a day for however many days as you're leading up to an opening. And I remember being exhausted lying on the bed and seeing this young man sitting on the edge of my bed telling me it was okay to rest, it was okay to sleep, and I didn't like, who is this man? He had a beard, and he was red hair, and I'm blinking, I'm like, "What is happening? Why is
Wow.
there's a man, but there's not a man," So
Yeah.
those would be the moments that I would shut it all down, So I really went through my early to mid-20s, again, very tumultuous earthly story that I was in. And in my early years, I was hooked into the victim frequency.
Okay.
I was very hooked into everything was happening to me.
Yeah.
I didn't really step out of victim probably till my later 30s. Like, it took me a while to
Wow.
to to change that internal understanding. Um,
I would love to
so
add,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
not to interrupt you, but I would love to add that's so important because what I'm hearing from you is that you had the defining moment. You had a defining moment of something is bigger than what we're seeing in this 3D world. But
Mhm.
yet it's not that as soon as you have a defining moment, all of a sudden everything shifts and now you're in meditation and now you're doing. So I
Yeah.
love what you said, and I think it's a valid um, message to those who are listening is there are times where you still go in and out of that victim and that fear. And then, many a times, again, there could be some, for some people, addiction or ways to
Mhm.
hide or things to stay busy, keep it loud. We
Yeah.
don't want to see the redhead at the end of the bed, right? That doesn't make sense to the narrative that we're used to. And so I really want to honor that. And I do resonate with that. And I'm sure I would be surprised if people didn't, is that there will be a defining moment for us, but it doesn't mean that we're there. Then everything is just like, yay, all the angels are like ready to sing the song with us and
Yeah.
find our song. We found a song and we're lowering the volume. So I really want to honor that because I really want people to hold on to that. I want them to see how you unpack that.
I think it's really important to highlight that because really I feel like um all of our accessibility with social media and all of this, it's wonderful on one hand, but the other hand is like we are curating what is being shared. And so there is a little bit of a misconception that it's like once you get on the path, it's ease and grace and da 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 da. But really, it's 2 step forward, 1 step back, 2 step forward, 5 steps back, 2 step forward, 3 steps back. Or to use other language, it's expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction.
Right.
And we can only process and access what we have the capacity to receive and understand.
Mm.
And our capacity is not just, being an open channel or an empath or sensitive. The capacity is also our nervous system. The
Hmm.
capacity is also our mental body.
Wow.
So there's so many, it is attractive to go into the ayahuasca ceremonies or the psychedelic breathwork world or to just want to talk to the spirits in the realms. But actually, we have to do this earthly work first.
Hmm.
You have to look at your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with money. Are you grounded in your body? Are you constantly falling and having accidents because you're just so out of it because you want to be up there in la la land because it feels good? We
Right.
have to, and that was me. I was an ungrounded individual because it was painful to be embodied,
Right.
and it takes courage to actually do that work, to be in the mud of our family story, to be in the mud of the inner child, to be
Right.
in that space. But the more you sit with it and you clear it and neutralize it,
Hmm.
the clearer our channel becomes. And if you're someone who's stepping into service, the better you become at serving your medicine because you're really able to walk from a place of neutrality. You're not projecting your crap on other people,
Right.
and you're able to be in compassion for all people, right? For all
Right.
experiences.
Now, would that be then just talking about, the walking of the talk, and you hear the cliche of like, it's great when you're on the mat. It's great to be a yogi when you're on the mat, but when you're off the mat in the life. Now, would that be then what integration means? Because we hear about, and I've experienced, doing the work, plant medicine, breath work,
Mhm.
even just, silent meditation. And then there's the integration period. Is that what you would call that? Is that the integration, is being able to like deal with what you just experienced? Because I think I want people to understand too, you can go to a ceremony, you can go to do ceremony, you can go on a retreat, you can go, and I'm getting these chills right now. It's kind of like, whoo, what's happening? Whew, I don't think it's a hot flash. Yep.
Spirit says.
I just said, yeah, wow, that's interesting. But I really want people to understand so that they take care. So
Yeah.
that when they leave and they say they go away, whether it's to a yoga space locally and do shamanic breath work with you, and I will share some stories later on as we get into what is breath work, what is like what types of breath work after your beautiful story of how you got there, because you've got some fun nuggets that I want you to share.
Okay.
There were a couple of fun ways that you got there in terms of your journey, but I really want people to understand through that. My desire for this conversation with someone of your caliber in this profession of medicine is not to discredit the getting back into the car, going back home with the kids, with the dog, with the husband, with the job, with the career, whatever that is. That's almost where it starts. And I really want people to understand that so they don't get hit up against a Mack truck. Right.
Well,
So,
there's two pieces here. So I would say that work on self, that excavation of honoring and clearing the earthly story, that's part of the path and the journey. Whether you're
mhm,
someone who is serving, whether you're a yoga teacher or a breathwork teacher or an osteopath or massage therapist, you have to do that work. Whether
mhm,
you're a mom, an aunt, a father, a son, we all have a responsibility to do that work.
right.
Not everybody is doing it. or has the capacity to do it right now. But when you do, we do need to step into that.
Right.
That to me is different than integration.
Perfect.
So integration, whether it is the big retreat or the plant medicine ceremony, or it's a sound ceremony, or it's a breath work with me, integration is, and as you've heard me say before, like the ceremony begins after the ceremony. The ceremony begins when you get in the car and
Yeah.
you get home and there's dirty dishes in the sink and the dog hasn't gone out for its walk yet, and right.
Yeah.
So integration is that space post the grand expansion
Yeah.
where we are braiding the filaments of that sacred experience or that connection with consciousness or that connection with our highest self. And we are braiding it into the everyday. We
Mhm.
are bringing it in to be seen, to be witnessed, and we're not enforcing, we're not trying to push anything, but we're
Mhm.
giving ourselves space to braid it and weave it in. And there's no timeline on integration.
Right.
That's truth too, right?
Mhm.
Some people are like, oh, well, I've done 52 ayahuasca ceremonies. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Like, unless you're in a deep dieta or you're doing some very deep work for something,
Mhm.
I always am a little wary of people who are just cycling around and doing
Right.
sort of that recreational circuit, because you could be in integration for the rest of your life after one ceremony. You could be into integration for 5 years after one ceremony. So it's like, really pay attention and to the presence of that now moment post
Mhm.
these experiences and weave them into your daily life. That is not easy to do. It's hard to find the sacred when you're trying to scrub the bits of the egg from the tin. I like to make egg bites in my muffin tin, and I'm like, there's no
I love
easy
egg bites.
way to get the egg smush
Yeah.
off of, it's like, how can that be sacred? Like, where in your life can you weave more in?
And I love the braiding. Braiding is a beautiful expression for me to think about that, because you've got your ceremony, you've got your family, you've got your inner work, you've got your environment. So the
Mhm.
braiding really seems like a beautiful analogy, so that people can remember that you don't have to be separate from your ceremony to your family. If anything, it's the reason that you're doing ceremony or healing or doing whatever inner work, maybe not ceremony. I think that's really key. So I loved that you shared that analogy. I think it's beautiful. And another thing I want to touch on this too, where you said sometimes it could be a lifetime or 1 year or 5 years. I want to touch on something too, because I have done ceremony in Mexico and with, a beautiful shaman that is local here. And I love the fact of just knowing, having the right information, because you can see on Google and on YouTube and on Netflix where you could say, and I'll give an example. If you do this specific plant medicine, expect to be in integration for a year. Well, then you're thinking, oh gosh, this whole year. And you're always looking for your integration message.
Yeah.
How about it could be a day? How about making sure that we're honoring ourselves? Because what happens is, and it is a narrative almost, right? Where then you're following the narrative of what should be, what you should expect. And then we may lose the magic of our own experience simply by, again, looking outside of something else for answers. So it's all very multifaceted. And I think it's fascinating to be able to share the insight that you have around whatever medicine that is, right? From
Um,
the heart.
Thank you. And I want to get back to that in a minute, but I want to pedal back for a minute about the braiding of, the ceremony or your sacred experience and family and this and that. I used to be that person who thought she needed to be different people.
Mm,
And I want people to understand that that's a real thing. And, especially, I mean, as I was for years, I only worked the upper realm. I only worked, energy medicine, Reiki, angelic realm, ascended masters. I
mhm,
wasn't on the path of shamanism yet. This is in the height of when I was working for one of the most expensive schools, private schools in Canada. I was traveling to China twice a year. Like, I was responsible for really, really large fundraising commitments. I was dealing with, 7-figure gifts, and I was in a suit and I was in a, and I was a little bit out of the closet, but not fully out of the closet. My family knew who I was, but my work people didn't know all the parts of me.
Yeah.
My immediate family knew the most of me. Like, and so you feel like you're going to split like a chicken bone eventually,
Oh,
like a
wow.
wishbone, right? Because you feel like you have your foot in two worlds,
Yeah.
and you're trying to navigate with all these different expectations you've placed on yourself to be through these various masks. And it was a teacher that said to me, but you're not a different person in the workplace. You are actually the same person. You may dress differently, but and so it was almost like a soul retrieval when I was able to like finally bring all of it together. It took me a few years, and it was finally in my last, I changed colleges, and in those last few years of my JLB, that I was finally able to merge all of me in
Mhm.
that existence.
Yeah.
And so that is a dance that we learn to navigate, and it's through trust and understanding, um, and feeling safe and expressing who we are. I mean, we don't have to go, I didn't go to work and rattles and things, but I went to work and I started to really be vocal about who I was and what my
Right.
philosophy was in life. And
Yep.
that's how I led. I was always a very heart-centered manager
Right.
for my employees.
Yeah.
But by the time I left that job, I had the directions written on each wall in my office. I had 3 separate little altars in that space.
Wow.
Like, it was very evident. I had huge hunks of dried medicine, like lavender
Yeah.
and different things hanging in the office to shift
Wow.
vibrations and frequencies. So,
Wow.
it's like, just I wanna remind people that with time, you bring yourself in. You don't have to be a different human for all these parts and places. So that I didn't wanna lose that.
That's so beautiful. And I wondered then too if you could elaborate on that specific piece, because as you're sharing that, and I'm thinking about my experience, or for others to think about their experience, I can imagine then. So if you think about the starting of you're on the spiritual path and you're still living the real life, but you're not
Mhm.
connecting your identity merging in, there's still a sense of, I don't want to use the word misery, but you still feel a little sense of disconnect, not aligned. And I think it's when you can merge the two and have the confidence to say, I am me, this is me, whether I'm in the yoga studio after work or I'm in the boardroom at work, that you don't, again, you're not going to walk in with your feathers, but you're still going to bring all, you could, I mean, that'd be quite interesting topic of conversation at the water cooler the next morning when you're not there.
I think I was.
I'm sure, wouldn't doubt it. But I think that that's where the alignment potentially is when
100%.
you can be yourself, whatever room you're in.
And I think what happens is when it's so incongruent in your physical body and in
Mhm.
your energetic body, and I know that feeling, and I have a client moving through that right now. It's like, when do you leave? When do you jump in? And
Wow.
I will never tell someone to quit their job.
Yeah.
We have practicalities in this life. We have to pay for our lives, and buttons and pennies are not gonna buy our groceries and pay our
Yeah.
rent, right? So we have practicalities,
Mhm.
but it is finding, like, it's like, where are the leaky parts? How can we call that in? And then feeling into all that is incongruent. Are you ready to take action in shifting and changing your life? And what does that look like? Because it's going to look different for every human.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. So in saying that, the practicality of all of it, we can go back then because I know we kind of went and we were
Yeah,
dancing.
yeah, we
Woo!
missed
Which is
one.
the most perfect way to be, because but going back then to before you were working for this top private college
Yeah.
in Canada, you were working on cruise ships, and you
Oh,
were
yeah.
doing, well, let's
Let's
swim
go
to the
back.
cruise.
Okay.
Let's swim to the port,
Swim
and
to the port.
and
Okay.
then I
Then
would
we
love
want to go
for,
back to the plant medicine piece, right?
yeah, and then I would
Okay.
love for you to explain to people your journey, which is not to say follow my journey, but
Mm.
when you decided that it was a practical decision, that it was a smart decision, you had the defining moment, you played with the cruise career,
Yeah.
and then moving into all of it, and then getting into where
How
you're
I got
sitting
here.
is so beautiful. and then maybe share that journey, because you did ignore your calling. You did, you did hide the voice for a while. And what helped you? What were the tools? Because I think that's the practical thing as well too, is if you can, in that, what were the tools that allowed you to say, okay, I'm done hiding my voice. It's no longer a negotiable for me to follow my dharma.
Oh, thank you for inviting me to. It's almost, it's interesting because my somatic body is giving me a little bit of discomfort there. It's like, oh,
Ooh.
you sure you want to talk about that again? Um,
If you're okay to,
I
if it calls to.
totally am, because I know that there's someone out there that will not have the same journey, but understand. And so I was, I threw myself into performing, and I went to an arts high school and all of the things. And the truth is, I got into performing. I started doing really high level community theater as a young girl, like 12, 13. I was grade 7 or 8. And so maybe that's 13, 14. My math could be off. And the truth was, that was a time when my family was getting divorced, and it was horrible. And so as the eldest, and the stuff that was happening, this was one thing my dad thought could help me. Oh, I feel a little emotional to share that. To move through that stuff. And I latched onto it. And through theater, I received this community. Through theater, I was receiving love, and from adults, like, it was just, I soaked it up, and it was really, it helped me feel safe, and it filled my cup, and I felt good. And so when things weren't well, like, I went to song, like, I sang. So because of life, I wasn't doing very well in high school, and I thought I was pretty stupid. So I, really struggled. And I think having the irony is, I ended up working in the private school sector, and I understand now that I probably would have had an IEP and some sort of, like, learning
Yeah.
diagnosis, like, but that wasn't the language back then.
Yeah.
And and so my dad said, well, let's audition for Etobicoke School of the Arts, which is at the time one of the top theater schools. And I got in. So I completed my last 2 years of school at ESA, and I thrived. And all of a sudden, I went from a kid who barely passed school and graduated with honors. Like, so that was like this massive thing for me. And I was like, Broadway or bust. Like, it was just like, I was very focused, very committed. Went to, did my 4 years of theater school. Again, theater. I had a very tunnel vision of where I was going. When I performed, when I was on the stage, this was before I had language around it. But I could feel my heart chakra be fully open.
Wow.
And it was connected to my sacral, which it was just my belly at the time. And I could feel myself just sweeping, like painting energy across an audience. So that's how I associated my performing, my singing and dancing, with the energy that was coming from my body. As a cruise director, that was pretty, I worked my way up. I started off as I was pretty burnt out from performance, by the way, by the time I was 24. And so I didn't really want to sing much. I was exploring plus size modeling, and I had some friends who had gone off to do a couple of contracts with the ships, and they said, "Come on out, do the thing." I'm like, "I don't want to sing. I don't want to sing." So, like, come on out and try this thing called, be a social. I can't remember. I don't know, some sort of staff member. I can't remember the title. You just have to, like, dress up, look nice, and speak to people. I was like, I could do that.
Yeah.
So I was out there very, very quickly, and very, very quickly I became an assistant cruise director, and then I became a cruise director. And at the time, there weren't very many female cruise directors in the company that I was working at. And so I was like one of 5 maybe out of a roster of 30, but I was a sub for a long time before they made me permanent. But then there was a lot of stuff there. I was really young. I had no management experience, and here you are with you're managing a staff of 100 people, like dancers, actors, singers, DJs, comedians, musicians, and then you're responsible for bringing in sometimes $4 million a month. And this was like back in the early 2000s. Like I didn't know what I was doing. But the paycheck was good, and I was doing the thing. But that was a really hard thing because I didn't know how to speak for myself. I didn't know how to like stand up for myself. I had some pretty awful things happen to me in terms of assault wise, and there weren't the systems and the conversations in place that there are now. So and then we went through Hurricane Katrina. So my ship was chartered by FEMA. That's a whole other story that I think one day I'd like to write a book about.
Wow.
So my ship was chartered by FEMA. There's all sorts of things that went through there. And then I got to take that ship back out after it housed the police officers and firefighters who were refugees in New Orleans. So I was based out of Galveston, Texas at that time. So basically, I went from understanding and being what I always said, I'm a lighthouse on the stage. I'd have like 2,500, 3,000 people in an audience, and I could feel myself, doing the thing, and I'd talk and do my thing. And then I felt the light getting worse and worse, and I developed like anxiety and panic attacks in a really bad way. And I became medicated. Social anxiety became really real for me. Stage fright was a big thing. I couldn't sing anymore at all.
It's interesting when you say that because I remember a little bit of this part of the story, but you would think that it would be the opposite. You'd have stage fright and then you'd get used to being on stage. But it's interesting that you could be in front of 3,000 people for a sustainable amount of time and then the stage fright. And so, not to interrupt you, but there's something so spiritual about that, of being your soul telling you that it's no longer, you don't have the capacity that you used to have. So
I didn't. It was, and it was interesting because I could talk to people. But I couldn't sing. If I had to bring in some sort of artistic thing, because I didn't see what I was doing as artistic. And then I got, this is when things really started. I was constantly in and out having different procedures because there was this kind of hovering potential cancer diagnosis. And I was, this is when we started to really understand my womb was not well and I was not well. And I just knew that the we were talking about alignment. I could not do it I was on my knees. And I came home. I had bought I had been engaged. My fiance I'd been based in Italy for 5 years. Like I'd been gone for 8 years. Never had a real job, at this point. It's like, but I had a girlfriend. I gave her access to my bank account. I told her I need to find a place to live. I think I'll come back to Toronto, even though I didn't have really any family except for my one little sister left in Toronto. And so she helped me buy a condo sight unseen. I knew what I needed to live. I was home for 2 months, had a ticket to go back out for my next contract. And I thought, this is the minimum amount of money I need to earn to live here and get off of the ships. And I found a job for a not-for-profit in child welfare, which I was really proud to be part of. And so it was a national not-for-profit, and I was really proud of the work that I got to do. And, it was a very different pay from what I had been earning, but I felt proud of the work that I was doing. Like I felt like I was making a difference. And in my existence, right? And so here I was transferring my skills, and that's how I stepped into basically client relations. And then I met my, long story short, 5-6 years later, I met my now husband, and then I started looking for it. So that's how sort of my career grew, and I ended up in the education sector for a long time, but always felt good about it because I would be fundraising also, once you're in that private school sector and you're at the caliber of fundraising that I was at, and the caliber of the school that I was at, there was some really wonderful, I want to say, scholarships and financial aid. And that's how I could wrap my head around that I still felt I was doing something important.
Mhm.
So fast forward to, I guess, me quitting, because that's where you want me to go, right?
Yeah. But the catalyst.
The catalyst. So I
Yeah.
left my really, really swanky job because there was changes, and those changes were not good. And it was, I felt so beat up, and I was miserable, and I was crying all the time, and I couldn't travel anymore. I was just exhausted. Like, they
Mhm.
just knocked me out energetically. I was struggling. Sorry, my dog's barking
Oh,
out.
never a worry. That's why it's called the living room.
Okay.
Dogs are involved. Don't worry.
Um, but I was really struggling. This is pre-shamanism for me,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I'd land in China, and I started to see a lot. And I would see everything from gargoyles to talons to, like, things landing on my boss, energies trying to attack us in the cap. Like, I was just like, what the fuck's going on? And this
Yeah.
is before I had the vocabulary to understand that level of the thing. So I was very sensitive to the energies that I was experiencing in China.
Yeah.
On my 40th birthday, we went to the UK, and I spent my 40th birthday actually, no, I'll go backwards. Just before my 40th birthday, I was in China. It was like early December, and we had spent the day with a donor I'd been working on for the last year for a large gift. And so very often, these relationships are relationships.
Mhm.
These are not transactional. These are relationships. So you spend years with people, really
Mhm.
getting to know them. It's all about these relationships. And this wonderful man, we spent the day, and we were in a beautiful monastery, and it was one of the only places. It's this temple, and it's one of the only places that survived. It's in Hangzhou, that survived the Cultural Revolution. So the old part was all in the grottos, and then we walked into the newer part, which were more structural. And he was very proud to take us there. This was midday, and then we were going to go for a beautiful meal. We walk into this temple, and um, all the monks, are moving through, and they're scanning their thumbs, and they're coming in, and there's a crew of them, all ages and sizes and shapes. And there's the biggest singing bowl you ever did see. It's probably as big as my living room. And I'm like, oh, great, we're going to see whatever we're going to see. And they hit the singing bowl, and my whole body cracked, and I started to sob uncontrollably. Now I'm here with a parent and a donor, and I'm here with the head of the college, the boss. He's the head of the whole thing,
Yeah.
which he was so good to me. He kind of got me in his way, and he always kind of took care of me in that way. But I didn't know how to express what my energetic body was moving through, but I was a hot mess. Um, yeah, this is me in a suit and heels on the other side of the world. About 6 weeks later, my 40th birthday, we go to Stonehenge, and I spend my 40th birthday at Stonehenge.
Mhm.
And when I came home, I had this massive being with me for a year. Like this incredible, I would say, it's like almost like a galactic fae being, like probably it had to be like more than 10 feet tall. It was like this big white kind of. So what I'm trying to say is I went through a massive opening and
Mhm.
shifting at around 40.
Wow.
there wasn't a yoga class when I was in Shavasana that I didn't have beings and entities coming through and doing surgery on me and talking to me. So now it's getting a bit more intense, and I'm trying to understand it.
For those that are listening to this, because again, our audience will be the extremes of,
Yeah.
dip toe into spirituality versus, oh, I know what family you're talking about from the light family, right? Because I'm thinking, different light families that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
Can you, for those who may be super curious, explain what that could be or your perception of it? Were you afraid and then you grew to not be? Like, if you could maybe just a
Yeah.
little bit of a sidebar, what is that for those that may be like, oh, I've seen it and I didn't know what it was? And so maybe a little bit of elaboration on
So
entities,
first
light
and
family.
foremost, I don't use the interweb for any of these things
Love it.
because, again, I let spirit tell me. I let them tell me. I do my work to stay as clear a channel as possible. So I
Yeah.
really do trust the information that comes through me. And I also know that not everybody who's placing information on the interwebs is not a clear and pure channel. And so there's projected stuff there. So just wanted to clarify that. The other piece is with spirit, they know, and with my team, they know that my mental body gets in the way. So they very often won't label things for me so that I can not get hung up on anything.
Beautiful.
So that particular being, from my understanding, was a galactic being of sorts. But when I say fae, think of the fairy world.
Mhm.
So think of it more like a galactic, fairy-like
Love it.
creature.
Yeah.
The purpose of that particular being, I came to understand, was to help me. Look, spirit's agreeing.
There you go.
To
Balloon
help
is
my
a sign.
yeah, to help my capacity, because that would have it was a bit scary at first. And
Yeah.
honestly, that particular being would show up for me usually when I was meditating in the bath, very often in the water,
Mm.
very often in shavasana, and then left after a year. After a year, just up and left, much like a power animal that's not your primary power animal. An animal totem will work with you until it's, complete. So we have guides and beings in all realms and planes.
Mhm.
And the key is that if a being starts to show themselves to you, or you feel them, not everybody sees, or you hear them, or you smell them.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you're asking, are you here for my highest and best good? We ask that 3 times.
Okay.
And if you ever get a niggle or a wiggle in your bones, in your field, that it's a no, you shut that down.
Wow.
Because something we want to remember, just because beings and humans and souls are on the other side doesn't mean everything and everybody is here for your highest and best good, kind of like life, you know?
Right. Yes.
So
Discernment is a thing.
discernment is a thing, and that's where I get really concerned. Some people
Yeah.
are playing around. You don't want to play around.
No. And in saying this with your woven braided story, as we're talking about now that you're getting into the shamanic breathwork, I want to also later on just remind myself to touch on what happens in breathwork, because there is this this divine, consciousness path that happens when we are in medicine. So just in terms of that could show up for people in the practice that your mentorship is within that shamanic breathwork practice. So I
For
want to be able to, and
for
I'll share a couple of
sure.
stories as well. Mhm.
Especially, every practitioner holds space with their own medicine and their own frequency, but I
Mhm.
actually go in with the intention of holding that quality of frequency. So I use the technology of prayer. I'm opening the portal by calling in the 4 directions and the 4 elements, and all the guides and helper beings within each direction of the path that I walk, which is the Andean Cosmovision. So I am intentionally opening up that space for us to work with breath in that way. That doesn't mean, again, we want to always release the expectation. I can't guarantee you're going to talk to grandma on the other side. I cannot
Exactly.
guarantee you the
Yeah.
aliens are going to show up, or Archangel Michael. The only thing I can guarantee you is you're going to have a really dry throat and you're going to want to
And
drink water.
I definitely, so yes, absolutely. Yes, you do. And I've been in many breathwork sessions with you, and I've never had the same experience twice. And, some of them were super out there, and others I just felt like I had a really great nap.
Yeah. Yeah.
But afterwards, I'm like, wow, that nap was super powerful.
Well, and truthfully,
So
sometimes your body's tired and you just really do need that nap.
that's it. Yeah.
Sometimes your body doesn't have the capacity to go in and do a deep breath work, and your body knows. Your body is so intelligent.
Right. And I think too, when you talk about the intelligence of the body and you just shared, having your vessel be clear enough for the messages, I think that's the important thing too, without beating ourselves up for the carrot cake or the glass of wine. But I
Mhm.
think it's really important, as those of us, and I'll include myself, I'm looking to really have a better relationship to source, a stronger, more impactful relationship to source. I'm personally getting called to be more disciplined, bring in certain um, best practices in my own life. And that is clearing this.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me, and I'd love for you to at some point also touch on where we are right now in this timeline. Whatever belief you have, is that I'm noticing for myself and those that are around me, a vastness of like quick, almost intolerance for what we used to have tolerance for,
Mhm.
be it nutrition, be it environment, be it whatever it is. And I think that's really beautiful, as you touched on it, that almost that responsibility as someone who is creating that impact or being a channel, a mentor for the collective, is it does start with self. It has to start with self, right? And it doesn't mean you're perfect.
Oh my
uh,
God, no.
right?
No, what is perfection? You're
No,
perfectly
nothing.
imperfect. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really believe in lead by example. You
Mhm.
know, we all know the yoga teacher who doesn't do yoga anymore. We all know the breathwork practitioner who doesn't breathe for themselves. I've been trying to be more mindful and actually do time lapses of me breathing so that people see me and like, yeah, she does breathe. Um, the other piece is there's a reason why I go into deep, like my dieta with tobacco, or I'm
Mhm.
going into prayer, like with my teacher in Peru. Like for me, it's important to keep going further so that I can come back and do more to support those who want to walk with me.
Yeah.
We have to, and then also like making sure I'm still going out and having fun with my family and hanging out with
Yes.
my husband and playing, because you can't forget play. Like that's the other thing.
Mhm.
We may be on this path, but that doesn't mean you have to be holier than thou, because that's not it either.
And I think play is medicine. Play is a form of medicine,
100%.
right?
Yes.
So
And
mhm.
that's my area of development, like that's where I don't always make enough time for play or to check out. Um, oh, there was something we were to touch on and I forgot about it, but it'll come back.
It will.
Yeah.
It will.
Yeah.
So speaking of imperfection, you didn't wait to move into the shamanistic practice of breath work. You do
Mhm.
other medicine. So what was that catalyst then that you said, okay, now it's time for me to introduce this. I'm not going to lower the volume on my spiritual voice and my
Yeah.
calling and my dharma. What did that look like for you? And then how did breath work become? It must have had an impact on you personally, where that was your medicine, as one of the medicines that you do work with for the collective.
100%. So I was still employed. I was still working. I was studying shamanism. I was full on in my job. I was still in a shamanic course, and I was introduced to breathwork, and I started doing a couple of. I was just trying it on, and my
Mhm.
breathworks were very much like shamanic journeys. And in like my second or first breath work, I remember my primary power animal coming forward and giving me all the information I needed about my womb. And I had been on the fence. I'd had a surgery on my ovary and about like a year and a half earlier, and I knew I needed to go back to the surgeon. I knew something was up.
Mhm.
And in this breath work, I'll never forget. It was clear as day, and I remember exactly where it was. The information was very clear that I had to go and see the surgeon, that I'm going to have this surgery, that it's more than what the surgeon thinks, that everything needed to go, the fallopian tube, the ovary, that, and then showing me where all of the endometriosis needed to be burned, like showed me everything, all this information in my breath work.
Wow.
But then also giving me the emotional layers, showing me the layers of all the
Mhm.
different parts stemming from my mother, as well as, and then the endometriosis being, that was something I suffered from greatly. And those in my community know my journey with my womb,
Mhm.
but how all of those layers represented every man who had access to my waters, to my sacred waters, to, so every lover, every non-consensual experience, how that had layered through me seeking love that was actually trying to fill the void that I didn't receive through the traditional mother-daughter relationship. So it was
Mhm.
a really powerful, like, first or second breathe that I got all that information. And so I thought, huh, okay, I need to learn this.
Wow.
Because in my brain, I was like, this is going to be kind of like, oh, this is great. I can just do this kind of beige modality and people won't know that I'm doing like something. And I did, to be honest. To be fair, the first probably 3 or 4 group breathworks I ever did, I tried to be super
I was
beige.
gonna say you're definitely not beige any
I know,
longer. I have not been witness to a beige breath work with Rebecca.
but I tried to be so Instagrammable. I tried to be, like, cool, like, kinda dancey music, and I was like,
No.
and then the moment I stepped into bringing in my prayer, to
Mhm.
bringing in my path, you could feel the energy shift in the room, and
Wow.
I could feel the potency of the experience people were having was very different. Why? Because I was fully standing in my authentic self and my medicine, which is way more powerful than me trying to be something else or to reduce the potency of the space that I hold.
Wow.
Does
That
that
is
make
such a
sense?
that is I mean, I could cry right now. That is whew,
Oh,
honestly,
thank you.
that is such a powerful message because that is, I think, what holds people back, myself included, so obviously it hit me, is we need to be all of our own selves. We don't
Yeah.
need to be part of someone else, and I know, and again, it sounds cliche, but it literally is, like, show up as you. Don't show up as what you think, and again, I talked about this on a couple podcasts ago, and with my connections and my influences and my friends and my community is that w and then I shared this on a podcast last time, is that, this when people are trying to be something else, like this imposter syndrome is when you're trying to run a race you don't even wanna run. You don't even wanna run the race, but yet you're like, you're getting your shoes on,
Yeah.
gonna run the race, and that's that misalignment. But when you can show up as you, and even with me with this podcast, I'm not trying to be everyone else's podcast with everyone else's set, with everyone else's mic, and with everyone else's message, and everyone else's theirs is theirs, mine is mine. And it feels better when we show up as our own self. And for you, and I have been, able to experience your breath work where I've gone because of how you've shown up was a gift and a permission.
Mm.
So I don't need you to dance the dance that you thought you should dance to see what may come from, your uh, your students. So it's so powerful for people to hear that. So
And
instead of
not to
wondering
do
what,
it for
yeah,
validation, right? Also,
oh,
that's the other piece. You don't need like, do what you know, do it safely, stay within the ethics and boundaries of your teaching, of your training,
mhm,
of the medicine that is you. Be fully you, the highest version of yourself, and it can only be nothing but medicine.
right, yeah, it's beautiful. And even in speaking to that, if you have more that you want to share around coming into the shamanic breath work within yourself, I do want to make sure that we touch on a couple of experiences that you have witnessed, I have witnessed, with
Through
myself
breath.
and with through breath, with your shamanic breathwork sessions that it was apparent to me that this is medicine, and I walked in not knowing. So
Some people do, and they're like, "What
I'm like,
happened?"
okay, well, it's breathwork, but it also says shamanic breathwork. It's going to be, I can't wait to smell the incense, and again, I've been doing personal and spiritual development for almost 2 decades now, so I'm not new. However, the breathwork, I was absolutely new 3 years ago. I only heard about people who were doing breathwork, and then I was able to experience it in the breathwork that you practice.
Mm.
And so it's quite impeccable.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
there's a couple of things I'd love to the technique I work with is called
Mhm.
conscious connected breath.
Mhm.
I walk with 3 certifications now. I'm certified through Alchemy of Breath, I'm certified through Integrative Breath, and I'm certified through 7 Directions Breath Work. All are conscious connected breath. All are a minimum 400-hour training, 8-month courses. It takes time to embody this. It's not just knowledge. You need to step into the wisdom piece. You need to understand the trauma-informed piece, the science piece. These are all the pieces that enable us to hold safe space, because we can re-traumatize people if we are not providing them with the information that they need to understand whether they can do this breathwork technique,
Yeah.
and if they need to use modifications for the contraindicators,
Mhm.
or if this is the right breathwork technique for them. There's and to simply make sure that they feel safe.
Right.
So conscious connected breath work, it's an open mouth breath. It's a circular pattern breath. There's lots of schools teaching it. Breath is not new. It's been around for, as a technique for over 5,000 years. Sufis
Wow.
have been using it. There's many variations. There's many ways to work with breath. I also want to touch on the word shamanic breath work. Technically, I can't use that language, and no one can use that language unless they have been schooled through someone who has patented that name. So I have a
Mhm.
real issue with that,
Yeah.
because it's been colonized now.
Yeah.
So you're telling me an indigenous person of a shamanic lineage from somewhere around the world who's been working with breath in their path and their journey could not now use that. It's just another form of colonization that has happened.
Mhm.
And so those of us who are shamanic practitioners, as well as certified breathwork practitioners, knowing that shamanic breathwork means we're taking you into a ceremonial trance and journey, we have to use different languaging. So I
Okay.
just want to honor that I'm not
Yeah.
trained in this particular person's
Perfect.
school.
Mhm.
And we'll just kind of leave that as that. I'm a shamanic practitioner. I'm a triple certified breathwork practitioner, and I merge my medicines together. So I call it shamanic ceremonial breathwork. So that,
Okay. Good to know. Good
yeah,
to know.
it's unfortunate,
Yeah.
but it's the equivalent of someone patenting the word Reiki. It really
Oh my
has,
goodness.
because shamanism doesn't belong to one nation. It doesn't belong to one tradition, to one culture. It's it comes from the world and the earth-based rooted indigenous cultures from around this planet.
Right.
But this is how I hold the space. And
Mhm.
in fact, when I hold medicine ceremonies, it is very similar. Very
Mhm.
similar. I just will open the doors a bit separately, right? And when we do the breath work, I open the prayer as one prayer at the top. We open the
Mhm.
portal, and then through that experience, I am safely holding space with the breath. You're going to get all that information. I'm going to be in and around. But when I feel into the space and I know that I can, I'll do some channeling. I'll do some energy movement and work on the space as a collective. If I
Yeah.
have X amount of people, I make sure I have a helper with me. So,
Mhm.
you never want to have too many bodies and not enough practitioners to hold that space safely. Uh,
Wonderful.
and then we close at the end. We always close the portal. We close the prayer. I work with tobacco. We come back into this earthly presence. So I have the intention of working with breath in those ceremonial spaces, not as therapy, but as this opportunity for you to open, clear, perhaps heal, transform, dissolve, release, let go, so that you can receive whatever that is. But sometimes that might be a super physical experience for a breather.
Can you
Sometimes,
share a little bit more about that? Because some people in my life have had an experience, but they were not aware of what that was. And I also had it, but I was aware
yeah,
of the physical
yeah.
component of it that could
Yeah,
be.
so with breath work, sometimes you can experience tetany, which is like the significant cramping in your extremities, in your face, in your full body. It can feel like a paralysis for some. And it's really the CO2 levels changing in your body, right? And so the key is to remember you're safe in your breath, but also to know that you always have control of the volume, I like to say, or the volume of the breath, or the breath experience. So if you're having an intense experience in the breath, you can reduce it by closing your mouth and breathing through your nose, slowing down the experience until you feel safe to come back to the open mouth breath, if you feel that is where you want to go. But you can have the most profound breath with
Yeah.
just through a nose breathe as well. Now, I have some people who they are like rattles. Their whole body is moving and shaking and moving and shaking, and
Wow.
they're so sweaty at the end, because they'll move through something, and
Yeah.
that's how their body is moving. And then there's some people who are like me. I'm a very gentle breather. Like I look dead when I'm breathing, but I
Mhm.
just take a sip of breath and I'm like, whew,
Mhm.
So the physicality of the experience is going to be
Mhm.
very different based on who you are.
And where you
And
are too
and
in your life.
exactly,
Yeah.
and where you are, right?
Yeah.
Where you are. I do find that many breathers, once they start breathing, the physicality starts to really release and let go, especially something like tetany. The more you breathe, very often within 6 or 7 regular breathwork sessions, that tetany starts
Mhm.
to release and let go. And the truth of the matter is, the more you breathe, the more you're starting to clear some of that earthly story, and the
Mhm.
more you're making space for yourself to explore these other states of consciousness.
Right. And I would love to share then as well too, because I had a personal experience. We were doing breath work. I think it was my second session with you. And I remember the intention, because you're very eloquent with the intention setting before. And I had the intention of releasing something specific. And in my breath work, I was able to actually see a visual, like not just me like meditating on the visual, but it actually happened to me where I actually saw the ashes of an old self fall off of my body. And
Wow.
it was so beautiful. And so that to me, I was able to say, okay, breath work is not just some time to sit in meditation and breathe, right? And that's where I was able to then differentiate my perception of what breath work was versus what now the um, just the honor of breath work. And I
Mm.
also want to share, I'm going to share an experience of my friend. I won't mention her name, but I told her I was going to share it. Um, and then I want you to then touch on what that is and how healing it is that you can heal trauma. And again, we make no medical claims on this podcast at all. We're not your doctor, but I do want, if you can, lightly share the opportunities that people have within that healing, like you had said, getting rid of the old stories. So, a girlfriend of mine, I invited her. She was going through some critical health issues, like critical health challenge. And I said, I'll pick you up. This is my first breath work. I've never gone, but this woman's name is Rebecca. I know her through my wonderful friends. So anyone she refers me, I'm there. And she said, yes, whatever I can do, I'll do. And I'll never forget, we were laying in this beautiful circle with your beautiful altar. And it was just so magical. And my friend beside me, it was kind of a joke because we were getting ready to go in. She goes, I'll see you on the other side. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's just breath work. And she went to the other side and she came out and we were driving back. It was night, driving back to my home. And she says, Di, now I know why I have what I have. Now I know why. She's like, now I get it. It was ownership. And it's not like I created this, but she said, and she had a peace within her. She was sobbing. And she said, I was able to see why I attracted this and why this has come into my life as a gift. I'm like, oh my gosh. on our first, it was our first, and it was, and I share that because, and I'm not saying that's going to always happen, because I've snored in my best breathwork class online. My last one with you, I had the best sleep ever with the dogs because it was on Zoom, and we'll get to that. But I really want people to understand that this is powerful, and this is not just another modality to like dip your toe in and say you do. I really want to honor what you do in that, like, and just really have that container for people. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I receive that with such an open heart and such love. And I think that's why I am such a big believer in breathwork, because you cannot bypass your involvement. I can't breathe for you. And breathwork is the modality where you really start to understand the accountability of how you can shift and change and clear your life and transform through your breath. So I get so many amazing stories. Like, I've had a woman get pregnant. I have had one of my breathwork club members, breathing so regularly through that journey of her breathing on her own with my recordings, doing all the meditations, all the things, found the strength and received the information that it was time for her to face the person who assaulted her back when she was a youth. I have had, people through their breath get clarity on their health, like you said, getting this understanding that it's not that the diagnosis has shifted or changed, but they've reframed this perspective and now they understand. So they're stepping in with a different way and a different outlook. That's a liberation of its sort, right?
Yeah.
My gosh, the stories are, I get so many beautiful emails and stories from people. So many people are just on their journey of self-development through the breath.
Yeah.
And that they're not people who want to work with plant medicine, but this is their plant medicine. And you don't have to work with plant medicine. You can achieve great, incredible quantum results with a commitment to yourself and breath.
Well, even that, and saying that, is absolutely scientifically true, because I do work, I've been to Dr. Joe Dispenza's advanced retreat in Colombia. I was so blessed to go last year with Anthony, and he does talk about that, is that it's inside of you. Like, you can get to a place where you're creating those high levels of DMT. And again, I'm saying this super light because I'm not a scientist, and
no, that's true. We can.
I barely understand it, but I'm like, I went there. I went to the divine in a meditation where, it's that same feeling, and you don't. And so I really want people to understand that you don't have to go to the next retreat in Latin America. And I mean, you could, but just be mindful that there are many more options out there. And I mean, I know we could talk for another 5.5 hours, and I'm going to have you back on.
I'd love to.
Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And I get to see you on Wednesday, May 15th, because I know you have an online breathwork. I checked your schedule for the month. I'm always like, oh. So having said that, Rebecca, I want to share, what are your offerings? I met you in person. I was living in Ontario, Canada. I attended a few very special, actually 3 days before I drove to move to Mexico, I was able to come to one of yours in Oakville, with all my girls. Oh my gosh, it was so powerful to have that gift before heading to this next chapter. So you do in person. You have a community. You do have Zooms for those of us who are not in your backyard, which I'm so blessed that you have. So I've been able to stay connected to your community. And so I would love to hear, what is it that you have going on? Is there anything special? I know you do private ceremony for yourself to refuel your energy. I know that you do that, which is so honorable as well too. So what do you have for those that are watching that are interested? I'll definitely put your info in my email in my show notes. But what do you have as an offering to those who may be interested in learning about what you do, or jumping on with me on say a Wednesday night on Zoom?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to share my things. Let's start with, it costs you nothing. You can just jump on. I try to be quite regular. Twice a month, I hold an online shamanic ceremonial breath work, and everyone and anyone is welcome to join. Um, and then we do some summer hours in July and August with just one a month. So that's a great opportunity. Those who are nearby, once a month I'm in Oakville, once a month I'm in Dundas, and then there's the odd sort of special one off where I get asked to do private retreat works or day spaces. Some other ways to walk with me. I have a beautiful 12-month container called Stepping Into Your Medicine. Now, this is a specific space for women on their path, whether you're a healer or not. We're all healers in our own way. We're all light workers. It's a space for us to be held and to go deeper on the path, and to eventually step into our confidence. So I have wonderful wisdom keepers and teachers that come on throughout the year. It's a year-long braid. I call us a braid. We're sisters who are braided together. And then it's a wonderful space for those who are stepping in perhaps to their modality. Perhaps you've got some certificates and you just don't know what to do. You've got some modalities in your toolbox, so that we're here to help you. It's kind of like the stop before you would maybe work with a business coach, because we're going to work on core wounds, imposter syndrome, ethics and boundaries, energetic boundaries. But I also have, an elder who comes and supports us online. We have another shamanic practitioner. We're going to work with the witch wound and the voice. So it's a beautiful, really rich program, and it's called Stepping Into Your Medicine. It starts on August 27th. That's when our next one starts. So the early bird special starts, I think, on the 23rd for a month. I've got some really nice things there. So that's all on my website. The other piece is I do retreats. We do some retreats. We have a beautiful women's journey to Peru that is sold out as of today, I believe.
Oh,
We
yay.
go
I'd love
every
to
year.
go.
Yeah, 6 months to go. We go in October. So that happens every October. And for those who might be wondering why all these offerings for women, part of my medicine and what I've been asked to do by Spirit is to create spaces as a water carrier to support women in their collective healing. But I work with some really amazing men I have some beautiful private clients who are men, really divine masculine on their path. And they join me for, psilocybin ceremonies, rape ceremonies, when I do things in person. And then this is the new part. So I love that we were talking so much about breath. January 25th, I will be launching the North American arm of 7 Directions Breathwork certification.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that is so beautiful.
Yeah, so that's in partnership with Steph Magenta. And so every January, I only have the capacity to offer it once a year. So it's an 8-month course, and that will certify people to become breathwork facilitators. So that is that's getting out there. So there's some ways.
So you also, I had done a brilliant ceremony with you, literally just I think a month after my mom passed, for the womb. And do you still offer that at all? I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you
So
do.
I
Okay.
started doing that last year. So I do that 4 times a year. That's
Okay.
my commitment. I really got clear one day in prayer in front of my altar. And last year was a really rough year for my body and my womb, and had to have another surgery. And I got really clear that I need to hold that space for women, for us to come together and to honor, all the waves. There's grief and there's joy. There's juiciness and there's sorrow, all of the parts. So yes, their next one will be in August. And that again is absolutely free. It's just an opportunity to come together in the virtual temple. And it's nothing fancy. We just come together with an open heart and some teachings and some experiential, ritual and healing. And and just honoring this part of our body. I place my hands on a lot of people's body, and that's the part that for many humans, men and women, we tend to be cut in half. We're either very much in the top half or in the bottom half, and not
Yeah.
fully connected.
Yeah. Interesting. No, I loved that ceremony. So I'm happy that it's still available because it was
Yeah.
interesting. I had just come back from it was after my mom passed away, and you said, we were just about to start, and I think you asked to like go get something that's meaningful to you before we start. And I'm like, oh, my mom is in a little Fabergé egg that I got from Italy. I'm like, Mom, you're coming into ceremony with me. So it's kind of like the first ceremony my mom ever did with me now that she's on the other side. But it was so beautiful. And so it was a very special ceremony for me. So I'm really grateful that that's available to everyone as well.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah, it
for
was lovely.
trusting us with your mom.
So two things before we go that I'm just feeling like I need to ask you. Number one, can you speak of the land in which you practice and share just really briefly? Because I'd love for you to share so people could understand like where you are and who you're practicing for and all of that.
Mhm.
And then I have one question that I feel like I need to ask you before we close out, if you don't mind.
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Usually I open my online ceremonies, but I am speaking to you from the land, the traditional lands of the Erie, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. And this land where I live is covered with the dish with one spoon, one pump belt covenant. It is also known as Hamilton, Ontario. And I live here on Turtle Island, now known as Canada in North America. And I invite everyone and anyone to become familiar of where they live
Mhm.
and to understand who came before them. Even if those nations no longer exist in this human form, they may be long gone. Um, when we stand and become familiar with these let's say masculine principles, or what was part of the patriarchy of this colonization, these treaties that were created around land masses, and we start to understand who the original land stewards were, the ancestors, these nations, we start to feel this connection, we start to understand. And this is how we start to step into a space of reciprocity, when we can say thank you. Even if you live in a condo in the biggest, most densest city, wherever you are in
Mhm.
the world,
Mhm.
Mother Earth is beneath that foundation. Even if
Yeah.
you're in a houseboat, the water is underneath there, and
Yeah.
underneath the water, there is earth. And so it's like really feeling into honoring the peoples that came before us, saying
Yeah.
thank you, feeling into that connection. When we start to develop that relationship, those ancestors come forward. They will walk with you, they will support you, but we must create that relationship. And then also thinking of our ancestors being more than the human. The ancestors are also the trees and the mineral kingdoms, the rocks, the four-legged, the winged ones, the reptile ones, the creepy crawlies, really starting to see. And that's the shamanic perspective, as well as the indigenous worldview, that all things
Right.
have a soul. Coming back to honoring the ancestors who came before us, and the indigenous peoples of this globe, of this planet, where I'm living now in Canada, we are in this great time of truth and reconciliation. But someone once said, reconciliation, what is there to reconcile? Actually, it's healing.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know,
Beautiful.
the Western, the Europeans, we've done some damage,
Yeah.
and we're here to repair.
Repair.
We're here to heal, and we have
Mhm.
a responsibility. Those of us who are not Indigenous, those of us who are not in the BIPOC body, I do believe we have a responsibility to unlearn, to listen and learn. And so I feel very strongly that I'm here to be a sacred ally, to use my voice when I can, to
Yeah.
share resources. I will always have a truth and reconciliation page on my website, so please go and visit. Lots of resources there, predominantly Canadian focus, but
Right.
lots of resources there, including artists, and authors.
Mm. Yeah.
This is how we begin to heal. And so yeah, that's
Love it.
that's my piece.
I love that. So grateful. And it is true when you share that beginning prayer on your breath work, in my first one being in Mexico, it reminded me, where am I? And the honor that I am to be on this sacred land. And it got me into really wanting to be more curious and open and, honoring those that came before me and all of the sacredness of this land itself in Mexico. And again, for those who are in Toronto or Vancouver or the UK, it doesn't matter where you are, it's still on land. We're still on land, right?
And
So
it's
it's
a
beautiful.
privilege to be held in that space, and Mother Earth, and
Mhm.
when, so, w like, this'll be, what, my 5th year in Peru, and it took Timmy and I a year and a half to channel. We fully channeled what our women's journey was. Like, it really was a channeled thing. We had no choice. Spirit was very clear. 2021 was like, "This is what you're doing. Here it is." We're like,
Wow.
"Oh my God."
Mhm.
And, we really kinda, I don't think I had ever thought that I would do something like that. It was never in my wheelhouse. And
Mhm.
so in 2022, we went back. Timmy had been living there, but I went back to join her for a month, and that month was spent praying on the land and to the ancestors of the land to continue
Wow.
asking permission to make sure we weren't being caught, like, to make sure we were in alignment, to make sure that this didn't vibrate in some form of tourism or recreation, that this was in full alignment and
Mhm.
frequency of what was being asked, and then also walking with our teachers, and then having meetings and things. But it was a long process because we wanted to make sure we had full permission from
Right.
the lineage, from the earth, from the grid.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And to just, it's like to not compromise the sacredness of it, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So beautiful. And I feel called to ask you something, which is not, I don't have a question lined up, but I feel called to ask you something interesting because at the beginning of this, you mentioned that you're still in process. We're still always evolving. We're always still doing the work. And so I have an interesting question. If you could feel what your future you elder would say to you, or an elder from maybe not this timeline, was to give you advice right now as you're continuing your beautiful path, what would that feel like?
Oh, that makes me wanna cry. It's so clear. It's so clear, and it's to be easy on myself,
Mm,
because 'cause I'm not. I'm actually very hard on myself. That's, like, the truth.
mhm.
It's the truth.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for thank you for stopping me in my tracks, like, and, I'm going into ceremony tomorrow, and I've been really thinking of my intention, and I feel like that just kinda locked and loaded into that intention.
Oh,
So thank you.
oh, my sincere honor. I love you. I am so impacted by your work and by you and your aura and your just dedication and desire to keep your community so safe and so sacred. So thank you so much for taking this time. If anyone wants to connect with Rebecca, email me, DM me. I will have everything on social media. I will make sure to connect you on my YouTube, my podcast, all of the things. And definitely, if you want to dive in and learn about breath work, just come to one of the classes either on Zoom
Yeah.
or locally. And I'm just so honored. Thank you so much. It's
Thank
been a
you.
sincere pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Hey, friends, thank you again for following and tuning in to the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. It really does truly support my mission to help inspire you through our beautiful guests that I also want to thank who have come on to share their beautiful stories of transformation. If you want to connect with me privately, you can actually go right to my website, lucysmiles.com. Feel free to send to me a personal email. You can also catch my newsletter by subscribing, which also includes my weekly intuitive messages. If you're on social media, you can follow me with my handle, I am Lucy Smiles. And if this was inspiring to you and something helped support you on whatever the journey is that you are going through, please feel free to review, write a comment, and most importantly, if you can subscribe and share this episode and all our other episodes, that would be amazing. My dream and my mission is to truly help you to follow the magic that ignites your inner essence. And so until next time, we will catch you soon. I hope to catch you on the next episode.